Hi, welcome to the episode on intuitive eating. I'm really excited. And what I'm going to do is split this into two different episodes because it's pretty long. I want to cover all 10 principles of intuitive eating, and I like to keep these between 20 and 30 minutes because we are busy. And so what we're going to do is go today until we get to around between a 20 and 30-minute mark, a good stopping point on the principles of intuitive eating, and then we'll pick up the rest in the next episode. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about what is intuitive eating, why I love intuitive eating, and we're going to get into the first of the 10 principles. I don't know exactly how many, depending on time, and then we'll finish the rest of the 10 principles in the next episode. So let's just jump in. Actually, before we jump in, I do need to give the typical disclaimer. I am not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor, a nurse, therapist, and I'm not an intuitive eating certified counselor, though that exists. And I actually am interested in getting certified in that. I think it would be really cool, but I don't have that certification. So what I'm going to share with you today is really from the book Intuitive Eating, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and my own personal experience with the process, plus some of the experiences with many of the women who I've coached and had great success with the principles of intuitive eating. So as always, if you're going to change the way you eat, it's always a good idea to consult with your doctor or a medical professional. Okay, so now that we've covered that, let's jump in and talk about the definition of intuitive eating. And I am actually going to read a lot of this from the website intuitiveeating.org. It has great cliff notes. And basically what we're doing today is kind of going through cliff notes of the Intuitive Eating book. But I highly recommend that you read that book. And I'll put a link to it just on Amazon in the show notes if you're interested in doing that. So the ideas and the principle that I'm about to share are not my own. I want to make that clear. I don't want to take credit for somebody else's work. They are the ideas and principles of two dietitians, Evelyn Tribble and Elise Reich. And they wrote the original intuitive eating book, I believe back in 1995. That's when they started intuitive eating. I'm not exactly sure if that's when the first edition of the book was published, but there have now been 4 editions of the book published. So I'll link the latest one here in the show notes, as I mentioned. So intuitive eating, it's a self-care eating framework. It integrates your instinct, your emotion, and rational thought. It's weight inclusive. And what they mean by that is it follows the health at every size model, which means that basically our size, our body size, or our weight is not as related to our health as society would have us believe. And the truth is you can be healthy at lots of different sizes. And we're going to talk about that as we get into it, but it's meant to be weight inclusive, meaning it's for anybody, no matter what size of body you have, no matter how much you weigh. And that is one of the things that I absolutely love about it. It's also an evidence-based model with a validated assessment scale and over 100 studies to date. So this has been scientifically studied, and they state a lot of the studies in the book. I don't have all of the references to the studies that I will rattle off today, but the book has them. And the other book, Health at Every Size, has them as well. And I will link that book for you in the show notes too, because that book has, so many scientific studies that actually prove that you can be healthy while being at a heavier weight. And we'll talk more about that as we get further in. But that was kind of more the definition from the website. The way I think about intuitive eating, just more from kind of, regular talk, regular language, is it's really, so when we think about, we were born with the instinct to know when we were hungry and needed food. No different than the instinct that we need to go to the bathroom. Those are both bodily functions that our survival depends upon, right? If we need to go to the bathroom, we have to go to the bathroom because we have to get that waste out of our bodies. And if we're hungry, we need to eat, obviously, to stay alive and keep our bodies running. I know that's stating the obvious. However, we don't ever question when we need to go to the bathroom and say, oh, well, I'm going to hold off. I shouldn't go, right? But when we're hungry, we do question it. And so the sort of idea, the way I like to think about intuitive eating is we were born with these instincts of hunger and fullness. And as we grew up and the effects of society started to happen to us throughout our lives, our mindset and our subconscious programming messes with those cues because we are such a diet and weight-based society that we get all messed up in our head, essentially, in our mind. Our subconscious programming gets all messed up and we lose those natural cues that we were born with. Not everyone, But the majority of people who've been in diet culture, or if you're a yo-yo dieter, you've been on lots of different diets in your life, and you really struggle to lose weight and keep weight off, which is really the majority of society. It's most of us have had that happen over our lives. We really mess with our intuition on hunger and fullness. And intuitive eating is trying to bring us back there. It's trying to erase the effects that diet culture and society have had on our brains and get us back to a more natural state of learning about our own bodies and what we need in our own hunger and fullness cues. And we're going to get into that as we go through the principles, but that's essentially what intuitive eating is. So now let's talk a little bit more about why I love intuitive eating, why I think it's made such a huge impact on the world. I'm going to go through just 5 of my favorite reasons and, in my experience with it, why it's been successful for me. The first reason why I recommend trying out intuitive eating is that diets don't work. And you'll see the studies referenced in the intuitive eating book, as well as the Health at Every Size book, if you really want to go and look at the science and the studies that prove this. It has been studied multiple times over many, many years that, and the conclusions are all essentially the same. 95% of people who start out with a goal of intentional weight loss for a diet will fail when measured in the 2 to 5 year mark. And the other thing that's interesting is that when we yo-yo, when we lose gain from dieting and restricting, it's more unhealthy for our bodies than just a simple gradual weight gain over time. And that's proven as well. And we're going to talk just a little bit more about that as we get into the principles as well. Number 2, you'll never have to be hungry again, because with intuitive eating, you learn about your hunger cues and you keep yourself full. I mean, not stuffed full, but at a fullness comfort level. When you're hungry, you eat, essentially. And we'll talk about that because I believe that's principle number 2. Number 3, eating when you're hungry gives you more energy. The bottom line is, if you're somebody who's been restricting, which I have done this many, many times over the years, you can just think about how hungry and low energy you get when you're on that low calorie diet and trying to lose weight. It just doesn't feel good. And when you can go back to learning about your body's actual cues, what your body needs, and listen to your body and give it what it needs, you don't have to be hungry again, which is really amazing and shouldn't be strange in our society, but it is. It's really strange to not have to feel hungry again, which is, it's really cool. And let's just stop and acknowledge the privilege there. If you are listening to this, chances are really, really high that you are privileged to not have to deal with true hunger. Most of us haven't, who are listening to this. The reason I assume you haven't is because you're listening to this probably on some sort of $1,000 smartphone. So you probably are privileged enough that you don't have to worry about hunger. I do recognize that that's not the case for everybody around the world. So I do want to just recognize the privilege that's involved with just even saying, if you try intuitive eating, you never have to feel hungry again. So the next thing is reason number 4 that I like intuitive eating. It takes away the extra stress and mind space that comes with restricting and tracking food. So this has been one of the biggest aha moments for me on my journey with intuitive eating and letting go of weight loss as my goal and shifting over to true health, is that I never realized how much time and energy and stress I was consumed by tracking my food and beating myself up when I didn't hit my calories or my points, depending on what diet I was on, because I've been on all of them. So much of our life can be consumed with tracking food, prepping food, beating ourselves up for what we ate, guilt and shame around food. And when you remove that from your life, it's very freeing. It's extremely freeing. It's also very scary. So I acknowledge that it is very scary, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, the fear factor that's involved here, because this process is really scary. But it's such a positive impact on the mental health to let that stuff go. Now, I'm not saying that you can't ever track, and tracking doesn't trigger everyone, but tracking does trigger a lot of us who've been really immersed in diet culture and struggled with our body image. And giving that up and learning how to listen to our body is amazing. And I'm at this point in my journey where I've gotten so comfortable with my body image and I've gotten so far out of diet culture that it actually feels safe for me to track some things again. And I'm not tracking with the purpose of losing weight. I'm tracking more to try to see how different foods affect my body. And we'll talk about that more too in one of the principles. and to see, like, for example, when I get more or less protein in, how I feel, how that affects things like my workouts, my exercise, my body movement. So that's been really interesting on my journey, going from tracking being like a very triggering, guilt and shame-filled thing, moving into it feeling more safe because I'm not using it to focus on weight loss. And just to clarify, though, that took a long time for me. This journey is a roller coaster and it takes a long time, and that's normal. And then the fifth reason that I love intuitive eating is it will ultimately lead you to being healthier. And this is in a number of ways. I mentioned before that yo-yoing is really hard on the body, and it creates our body. It causes our body to be more unhealthy than if we were just to sort of very gradually or steadily gain or remain at a heavier weight versus losing weight. Those are both healthier states than yo-yoing, weight loss, weight gain, weight loss, weight gain over the year. So physically, it makes our body more healthy. And then psychologically, it's huge because we are focused on overall health here, and mental health is a huge component of that. And I have had women who've taken my program and embraced this and gone from restrictive eating over to intuitive eating and gained some weight, because it is quite normal if you've been restricting, if you switch over to intuitive eating, to gain some weight. And that is scary. Like, I get it. I was very scared when I started this process. But the women who have gone and gotten their blood work done alongside this, the blood work has either improved or stayed the same, even with some weight gain. And so it's just further proving the studies that show that our weight, it's not as related to our health as society has brainwashed us to believe it is. Okay. All right. With that, let's actually jump into the principles. So there are 10 principles. What I'm going to do here, and I apologize if I don't want it to come off as a little bit boring, but I am going to read each one of the principles because Cliff Notes version, I think it's going to be a very efficient and effective, valuable use of your time just to hear the way they have written these principles. I'm going to read each one, and I'll try to just do it quick so I'm not boring you. And then we're going to talk through it. Okay. So principle number 1 is reject the diet mentality. And it says, throw out the diet books and magazine articles that offer you the false hope of losing weight quickly, easily, and permanently. Get angry at diet culture that promotes weight loss and the lies that have led you to feel as if you were a failure every time a new diet stopped working and you gained back all of the weight. If you allow even one small hope to linger that a new and better diet or food plan might be looking around the corner, it will prevent you from being free to rediscover intuitive eating. Okay, so essentially what that's saying is if you're going to embrace intuitive eating, there's no more dieting. And you can't focus on weight loss. Dun, dun, dun. Right? That is terrifying. Like, I get it. When my therapist first was encouraging me to go down this path, and this was years ago, I think we're coming up on 12 years ago, I legitimately thought that I would gain 300 pounds and die of some sort of heart-related disease because my family has cholesterol and heart disease, and I thought that if I wasn't actively trying to pursue weight loss, trying to lose weight, that I would go so far in the other direction that I would die. And I really pushed back on my therapist for medical reasons. I thought she was crazy. And luckily, she stuck with it. She was persistent. And I did eventually give it a try. And it was a yo-yo journey that took me a couple of years, which is normal and common. And spoiler alert, I did not gain 300 pounds, and I'm still alive today. And to be honest, I'm the happiest and healthiest that I have ever been. My health has certainly improved, and I have not lost weight. I am within a few pounds of when I was fixated back then on losing weight and obsessed with it. And I just want to honor how scary that is. And there's nothing wrong with you for wanting to lose weight and for that being scary. That's very real. Because society has brainwashed us that we have to be small and we have to lose weight and that we'll die if we don't lose weight. And all of that is just not true. And then there's this other argument that I get a lot that people bring up. Well, what if my weight is hindering my day-to-day activity? So maybe you have some sort of joint pain or back pain, or you can't do the things you want to do because your body is heavier. I hear you. That is real. The tricky part is people say, no, I do need to lose weight for those reasons. And I even tried that with my therapist too. The reality is though, yes, that is factual and let's honor that. However, if you start a diet with the goal of pursuing weight loss, 95% chance you're going to fail. So it is not the solution to losing weight to make yourself feel better. It's just not. And I strongly believe the 5% who quote unquote succeed, meaning they lose weight and they keep it off over the years, I think it's because they've shifted their mindset more over to this intuitive eating mindset. I really do think that somewhere along the path, they learned how to accept and respect their bodies instead of obsessing about the way they look and weight loss. And that's why I believe that they learned how to focus on sustainable healthy habits versus the really difficult and, I'm thinking about hour-long workouts at the gym, super sweaty, hard, you're sore the next day, like exhausting, unsustainable stuff. They learn along the way that that isn't sustainable, and they do more reasonable and sustainable healthy habits. And that's why I think the 5% end up succeeding. I really do think they shift over more to this mentality. And so if you are somebody who falls in that category, what I really encourage you to do is try something different. The way that you've been trying it in the past hasn't quote unquote worked because you haven't lost weight, which has been your goal. Try shifting your goal away from weight loss, away from the scale, and over to actual health. And I like to define actual health by how you feel most days. Do you feel good most days, mentally and physically? Do you have good energy most days? Not all the time. No human is going to feel great and happy all the time, right? We talked about that way back in module 1. But most days. And then blood stats. So go to the doctor, get your blood stats done, cholesterol, blood sugar, blood pressure, any blood stats that your doctor will pull, and measure it that way. Make that your goal, because those are true indicators of health. And your weight is not one. It's not. We can't tell what a person's health status is by how much they weigh. We just can't. And your brain might be resisting or arguing that, and that's because society has brainwashed us. But we just can't. So, and by the way, the BMI scale is complete BS. And you'll see this if you read Health at Every Size. The studies have been done to prove that the healthiest group in the entire BMI scale is the overweight group. That's just, it's proven scientifically. You can go read about it. We don't have time to cover it all here. I personally, on the BMI scale, am in the category of obese. I'm officially obese. And like I said, I've never been healthier. My blood stats are good. I feel good. I move my body 6 days a week. I eat mostly healthy. I mean, I eat in balance. So it's just not always an indicator. I'm just bringing that up because it's just not, it's the way somebody looks and the way their body looks is not an indicator of health. And while we're on that topic, I think it's a good time to do a reminder. We talked about this before, but another reminder that it is never okay to comment on somebody's body, even if you think it's a compliment. It's never okay to comment on somebody's body, even if you think it's a compliment. Lots of reasons for that. You may be complimenting a sickness or a stressful event in their life if they've lost weight. But maybe not. Maybe it's a friend and you know they've been working really hard and they've been trying to lose weight and you want to encourage them and tell them good job. Well, here's the problem. There's a 95% chance that friend's going to gain all that weight back plus a little more. And if everyone is complimenting her when she's thin, she's going to think she's only valuable and worthy when she's thin. So by complimenting her weight loss, you're enabling what society does in praising us and wrapping our value up in the way we look and our body weight. So I really strongly encourage you to never comment on the way somebody's body looks, even if you think it's a compliment. All right. I am so passionate about that one, obviously. I think we covered that. So principle number 1, reject the diet mentality. If we're going to go down the intuitive eating path, we have to let go of dieting, of any sort of formal restrictive diet, because we're going to learn how to listen to our body. And we're going to talk about that in the principles coming up. And we have to let go of the pursuit of weight loss. We have to switch to healthy habits, because intuitive eating is all about health. That's a misconception for some people, that if you're going to be an intuitive eater or if you're quote unquote body positive, that you don't care about health. And that's not true. This is very much, when these dietitians wrote this book, it was very much rooted in health. And you'll see as we go through and talk about it, it is very, very much rooted in health. So we're shifting away from focusing on weight loss and we're shifting over into focusing on healthy, sustainable, healthy habits. And then our body's weight is going to do what it's going to do. After we shift over, we learn to trust ourselves with food. We reprogram our subconscious. Weight loss is, we're not saying weight loss is bad. You might lose weight as a side effect of this when your body regulates. You might not. You might think that you're at an unhealthy weight and maybe your body is meant to be at that weight and you're actually perfectly healthy if you go get your blood stats checked. That's what happened to me. I've always been in a larger body but I've always been athletic and played sports and been able to do what I want to do. But I always assumed that I wasn't healthy because I was in a larger body. And on that BMI scale, I was in the overweight or the obese category. when it's just not true at all. It's not true at all. I'm perfectly healthy and was the whole time. So I'm a good example of that. Okay, let's go on to principle number 2. It is honor your hunger. So I'm going to read it and then we'll cover it. Keep your body biologically fed with adequate energy and carbohydrates. Otherwise, you can trigger a primal drive to overeat. Once you reach the momentum of excessive hunger, all intentions of moderate conscious eating are fleeting and irrelevant. Learning to honor this first biological signal sets the stage for rebuilding trust in yourself and in food. Okay, so this simply means when you're hungry, eat food. It's as easy as that. It's just like what I was talking about at the beginning. When you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. It is a primal bodily instinct to keep you surviving. When your body tells you it's hungry, eat food. Now, this is actually quite difficult for many of us who've gone through yo-yo dieting and restrictive diets for our whole lives, because we don't actually understand our hunger cues anymore because we've suppressed them for so long. And it takes us some time to get back into really understanding and paying attention to this. So where I like you to start is on a hunger scale. And I think we talked about this back in module 1 as well, but it's a good reminder. Think of a hunger scale of 1 to 10. 1 being like starving, hangry, haven't eaten in a very long time, barely functioning, and 10 being like sickly, stuffed, the most Thanksgiving full you felt, right? Think about it on 1 to 10. And your goal is to sit in between 4 and 6. So if you kind of start really paying attention to that throughout the day and seeing how you feel, and it's about awareness, essentially. It's about really paying a close attention to, okay, I let myself get to a hangry mode. If I can look back over the last couple hours, when did I start noticing that I was hungry? Because when you started noticing when you're hungry is when you want to get yourself prepared to eat. So let me give you an example of that. I've learned through this journey and really paying attention to my body and better learning my hunger cues that my first sign of hunger is usually distraction. So before my stomach feels hungry or I get hangry, because I do get hangry, I'm one of those people, I start losing focus. That's the first sign. Because when I was paying attention, I started noticing that at work, like around 10:30, 10:45 in the morning, I would start losing focus and I would pick up my phone to scroll social media and all of us do that sometimes, but I noticed it was a pattern at that time. And I started to learn that's my first hunger cue is distraction. And if I can be really smart about that and if I don't have a plan for food, if I can get a plan for food. So if that means ordering some food, or if I'm at work going down to the cafeteria, or even if you're at home starting to prepare your lunch, then by the time it's ready and I have food in front of me, that's really the time that I'm more like a level 4 hunger where I should be eating to get myself to more of a level 6 fullness. And we'll talk about the fullness in a little bit, but it really is the same on fullness, paying very close attention to your fullness cues. And those get all out of whack when we're dieting and restricting. So it's a process to figure this out. So if you're thinking, well, I don't even really know what my hunger cues are, that's actually quite normal. And it's about awareness and starting to pay very close attention. All right, let's talk about principle number 3, make peace with food. Call a truce. Stop the food fight. Give yourself unconditional permission to eat. If you tell yourself that you can't or shouldn't have a particular food, it can lead to intense feelings of deprivation that build into uncontrollable cravings and often binging. When you finally give in to your forbidden foods, eating will be experienced with such intensity, it usually results in Last Supper overeating and overwhelming guilt. Okay. This is, I think, probably the second scariest part of intuitive eating. I think the first scariest part of intuitive eating is actually making the decision to stop trying to lose weight. That is number 1 most terrifying part. But you can do it. You can do scary things. And it's normal if you think that's crazy. I did too. It's normal. I promise it's not. And I promise it will change your life. Second scariest part is eating whatever you want. And this is interesting because if you trust the process and you really allow it, you do get to a point, it really is true, you do get to a point where you don't need the cravings as much as you did. And Rachel, who was in episode, I'm going to figure out what number she was, episode 7 or 8, when I interviewed Rachel, she brought this up. She had I can't remember the type of candy, but there was a type of candy that she would buy and she would eat the whole bag. It was very much like a binge trigger food for her. And as she started to embrace intuitive eating, as she learned it in the program and we talked through it, she allowed herself to have it. She just allowed herself to have it at the beginning whenever she wanted. And true to form, she really did. And she describes it still as miraculous. It's awesome that she started to lose the craving and it started to lose its excitement. And so now she can just have that candy in the house and she can have a couple of those when she wants them and she doesn't feel the need to binge it. And that is how this is supposed to work. You've lost your trust. Your body doesn't trust you when it relates to food because you've starved it and binged it and starved it and binged it so long. And it's not your fault. This is like society. There's no judgment here. I've done it. Lots of us have done it. But we've messed up our metabolisms and gotten ourselves out of whack for so long that we just don't trust ourselves anymore. And that's what causes a lot of the binging when things are in the house. Like when we think, oh, I just can't have the quote unquote junk. We're going to talk about that word in a minute. The junk in the house because I'll eat it all. It's because we've deprived ourselves for so many years, for so long of those things. Now, I will say, so if you really dive in here and you start trusting the process, it should eventually change and get better for you. But should is tricky, right? Because for some of us, we may be eating to avoid something that's going on in our life that we need to work on. So this one's very tricky because I think that if you don't work through your emotional issues or past traumas, we all have them, some big, some small, but we all have them, then you could be at danger when you're allowing yourself to eat whatever you want to go on like serious binges that could eventually lead you to getting less healthy versus more healthy. And so one of the principles talks about this later on, but I strongly encourage as you go through this process to do it with support. I recommend a therapist. I personally believe everybody should have a therapist. And a lot of our work programs provide free therapy. So if your work provides that and you're not taking advantage, please do. But this is a really scary roller coaster process because when you first start letting yourself eat, you're going to be so scared of it that you're going to be tempted to restrict very soon after like a week of letting yourself eat, especially when you see the scale start to go up a little bit because it will as you enter this phase of the process. I recommend support because if you can't get out of this phase it's not getting out of this phase. If it doesn't regulate after some time, and I did this period for like 6 months before I started to see a difference. The time could vary for different folks. If you do start to go through it and you don't see it start to regulate where you start to trust yourself and you don't need to binge on these more triggery foods, you're probably eating to avoid some sort of trauma in your life, and a therapist can help you work through that. And that's normal. We all have it. There's no shame in going to therapy. Highly, highly recommend it. Okay. So making peace with food. Okay, I think I'm going to actually wrap us up here for this episode because we're approaching 30 minutes and we'll go into principle 4 in the next episode. But I'm just really excited about this whole topic in general, and I realize it's a scary one. So if you would like support, there are opportunities to work with me one-on-one. I run this whole program one-on-one. It's 10 weeks. You get 10 one-on-one sessions with me. We go into your specific needs within the program, into your life. I've had multiple ladies do it that way. It has changed their lives. The successes are amazing. You heard from Rachel and her successes. I have a couple of other ladies who are going to come on the podcast and share their successes. I promise it will change your life. Like I promise money back guarantee if it doesn't. I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy like an infomercial, but I really am that confident about it. So if you want help with this stuff one-on-one, go check out my website. The links are in the show notes to my courses and one-on-one. There's a little link you can click there and fill out a form to work with me one-on-one. I would love to do it. Or otherwise, follow me on Instagram at Katie Blummer, KATYBLOMMER. And you can message me there if you're struggling or if you have questions. Always happy to talk anytime there. So please do that. And as always, if you're getting value out of the podcast, please let friends and family know about it. My goal is to get it in front of as many folks as I can, as many women as I can. And if you are getting value, please leave a positive review. Going in and taking a minute to click and leaving a 5-star review and leaving comments, it actually helps the podcast be seen by more people. The podcast platforms reward high ratings by showing the podcast to more people. So that will help us help more people. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll finish up intuitive eating in the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Working Mom Happiness Method. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from listening. For show notes or to enroll in the Working Mom Happiness Method coaching courses, visit www.womensbestlifeuniversity.com.